So, how does a democracy get dismantled? It's almost never a big, dramatic overnight coup. Our sources today argue it's a much quieter process, a series of small, kind of sneaky actions that, over time, completely change the system from the inside out. So let's dive in and see how that can actually happen. To really get our heads around this, we're not going to start with a theory. We're going to start with a specific moment in time. The place, Minnesota. The date, late January 2026, and a major crisis is unfolding. A news report from a European outlet, Blick, paints a really grim picture. Two U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, have been killed by federal agents. But instead of an investigation, the report describes things escalating. Protests are growing, and the city is at a total boiling point. And this brings us to the central question we're tackling in this explainer. How does a democratic nation end up in a moment of such deep crisis and division? Well, the answer isn't a single event. It's a process. One of our sources, a report from the watchdog group Crew, actually puts a name to this process: salami tactics. And it's such a powerful metaphor, right? The idea is that you slice away at democratic norms one little piece at a time. Each individual slice might seem small, maybe even justifiable to some people, but you keep slicing, and pretty soon you've eaten the whole thing. So how do you even spot a pattern that's designed to be so subtle? Well, this watchdog group, CREW, they tracked all these individual actions and then sorted them into a framework. And they argue this is the only way to really see the bigger strategy that just gets lost in the noise of the day-to-day news cycle. And this is their framework. The report sorts these actions into what they call 4 fronts. First, there's corruption, using your public office for private gain. Second, the weaponization of the justice system and the military against your opponents. Third is retaliation, which is using regulations to punish critics. And finally, hiding or distorting official information. Let's take a look at what they found on each of these fronts. The report describes the period starting in January 2025 not as a trickle of changes, but as a torrent. That's the word they use. And it's that sheer volume and speed that we really need to look at here. All right, first up, weaponization. This is all about taking the immense power of the state and using it not for impartial justice, but to go after people because of their political views. What's really interesting here is the escalating pattern the report lays out. It says it starts on day 1, January 20th, 2025, with clemency for everyone involved in January 6th. Then, a few months later, the focus shifts to critics, with memos telling the Attorney General to investigate former officials. And by October, the scope widens again with the federal indictment of a state attorney general who'd previously sued Donald Trump. Okay, let's move to the second front and see how this all builds: corruption. The report defines this pretty simply as the abuse of power for private or personal gain. It's all about blurring that line between public service and just enriching yourself. And the report gives some really powerful examples here. In February 2025, the head of the office that protects whistleblowers gets fired. Then in May, the president announces he's going to personally receive a new Air Force One worth $400 million as a gift from Qatar. And then by December, a former president of Honduras, who was convicted of drug trafficking, gets a pardon after a long-time Trump ally campaigned for it. Now for the third front, which the report calls regulatory retaliation. This one's a little more subtle. It's about using the boring, routine functions of government, things like tax audits or licensing or federal funding, to reward your friends and go after your enemies. The examples here focus on universities and the media. So in April, the IRS is asked to look into revoking Harvard's tax-exempt status. Then, check out this sequence of events in July. Paramount agrees to pay $16 million to the Trump Presidential Library. A few weeks later, a show hosted by a very prominent Trump critic gets canceled, and at the same time, a major merger for the company gets approved. And then by September, another late-night show is suspended after pressure from the FCC. The final category is all about transparency. I mean, a democracy just depends on citizens having reliable information so they can hold their government accountable. And this front, according to the report, is all about hiding, distorting, or just restricting access to that information. The timeline here shows a few key moments. Just days into the new term, 17 independent inspectors general, these are basically the internal watchdogs of government, are all fired. By summer, national climate reports are taken down from government websites, and in August, after some weak jobs numbers come out, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is fired too. Okay, so we've seen the what, this whole torrent of actions that the CRE report documented. But what does it all mean? What's the bigger picture? For that, we're going to turn to another source, an academic analysis from the journal Policy Studies, which looks at the broader impact of these types of changes. And the paper asks a really fundamental question. Do all these actions represent a totally radical break from the past, or are they more of an accelerant? Like pouring gasoline on fires that were already burning. And the conclusion is really insightful. The author argues that in a lot of these areas, the effect wasn't about creating something brand new, but about accelerating something old. By undermining institutions or fanning the flames of hyperpartisanship, these actions just strengthened forces that were already there in society. So, if we put it all together, here's the key takeaway from our sources. The salami tactics, all those small incremental slices, they don't just add up. They act as an accelerant. They speed up and intensify trends that are already there, pushing the whole system toward fundamental change at a much, much faster rate. And that leaves us with one final and I think crucial question. If a democracy is changed one slice at a time, at what point do those individual actions stop being just actions and actually become a new reality? At what point do all the slices become a new whole?